This morning I have the pleasure of inviting some of the guys I've been working up with in Broome for a session on best practice Indigenous engagement for healthy country management. And this, I managed to meet all of these guys when I first started on the program as the node leader. Went up for a workshop with Senator Pat Dodson, ran it for us, and met a bunch of really enthusiastic groups across all of the Kimberley Saltwater country groups. And we formed the Kimberley Indigenous Saltwater Science Project. And what's come out of it's been a really great engagement of groups up in the Kimberley and researchers to work with them. So this morning I've got the pleasure to introduce Dean Mathews, who's the project officer from Yawuru Land and Sea Unit. He's also the chair of the Joint Management Board for Roebuck Bay Marine Park. Albert Wiggin, who's the cultural manager with KLC for the Nyul Ranges. Bo Austin, who's a postdoctoral research fellow with Charles Darwin University and CSIRO. And Rebecca Dobson, who's a research fellow with UWA. And together they form what's presenting the work that's come out of the Kimberley Indigenous Saltwater Science Project, as well as talking about some of that Indigenous engagement in the Kimberley. So, Dean.
Good morning all. As Stu said, my name's Dean Mathews. I'm a Senior Project Officer for the Yawuru Native Title and Environmental Services Unit. 7 years in the job, and I suppose in the last 7 years I've been sort of working tirelessly with the state in the development of the Yawuru Conservation Estate Plans and the Roebuck Bay Marine Park Plan. A pleasure to be here today, and thanks to the WAMSI for inviting us down to talk about the KISS project. I think the session today will give you a bit of an overview about what it means from a personal perspective from a traditional owner in regards to what the importance of, I suppose, people in saltwater country or Indigenous people in the landscape. Both Albert and I will sort of give that personal reflection. We'll talk a little bit about the KISS products, the project itself, and then we'll go through the products. Also in that session, we sort of decided that in the context of collaboration and partnerships, talk a bit about the marine protected areas and some of the work that we've been doing in the Kimberley, some of the challenges and obviously some of the successes in that process. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country that we're here, the Wajak Noongar, and thanks to Uncle Len Collard yesterday for his warm welcome to country, and acknowledge the distinguished guests of the WAMSI Marine Board here today. So obviously, you know, Indigenous people in saltwater country. There's a snapshot of my Roebuck Bay, and as traditional owners, the native title holders of the in Northern Australia. You know, some of us have native title rights, native title, and with those comes rights and recognition, responsibilities to look after country. We're the cultural landscape. There's a living cultural landscape up in the Kimberley. Traditional owners, through customary law and practice, are obligated to protect and manage those countries. So, and with that comes livelihoods and aspirations of Indigenous people within that landscape, to participate in the development of the northern economy as well. So Indigenous ranger groups play an integral part in that role, working on country and protection of country and the biodiversity and ecology that exists within it. So here I just sort of wanted to this slide sort of reflects a bit about Indigenous people within the landscape. So traditional owners, for thousands of years have been part of the landscape. It's provided us with the resources, it's sustained us, to where we are now. So it's a very resilient, we've been resilient within that landscape. So here we are today, talking before you in regards to collaborative partnerships into managing and protecting that landscape. So with that, there's a bit of I suppose the historical and contemporary land management. The Yawuru Joint Management Program employs 6 Yawuru men. They sit within the department and they implement, I suppose, the cultural values and the Western science approach. So it's a blend of Western science and traditional knowledge, and there we have the Yawuru Joint Management Ranges with the Premier releasing one of the satellite tagged turtles that we had a couple of years ago, and that's part of the, I suppose, the partnership and collecting data or information and building on that with our traditional knowledge. Land and sea management is a critical part of Northern Australia. Australia's economy employs hundreds of Indigenous people across the north. It dwarfs pastoralism and mining as a source of employment. So, Indigenous ranger groups are growing in the north, and they are playing an integral part in managing that landscape. This work makes an irreplaceable contribution to maintaining globally significant natural assets such as tropical rivers, marine environments, and the management of biodiversity, including fire management, and building data and knowledge of threatened species and invasive weeds. Through our PBC groups, prescribed body corporates, ranger groups, we're developing opportunities for Indigenous enterprises and engagement in the northern economy, particularly through the creation of carbon industry, tourism, biosecurity, and other environmental services. As Stu alluded to yesterday, the whole is better than sum and parts. So if we think about how do we come together in regards to managing that landscape, I think that's I suppose the true reflection that collaboration and partnerships are an integral part of that, in us moving forward in protecting those key environmental and cultural assets that exist within that landscape in the Kimberley region. I think we need to become more innovative in our approach. So hence today, you'll see some innovative approaches in regards to how do we, the marriage of Western science and traditional knowledge. And obviously, how do we, I suppose, look from a regional perspective around monitoring and evaluation of key ecological species or assets within that landscape, and obviously protection of protected or migratory species as well, like such as dugong and turtle as well. So the vision of Indigenous rangers to take a central role in the northern economy by applying a combination of Indigenous knowledge, Western science and technology. This is evident, obviously, with the Healthy Country plans that we were sort of a part of that. Our Indigenous ranger groups have Healthy Country plans, and they're the visions and aspirations of those groups in regards to what they want to protect and manage within their landscape. The recognition and support by policymakers in this thriving economy and the importance of building capacity of native title corporations to manage and control their are two key areas of focus. So here, I'd like, this is, I suppose, an innovative, when I reflect innovation. Here we have a snapshot of the Yawuru native title boundary. And, pointer, if I get this right. So here we have the Yawuru terrestrial estates that we jointly manage in partnership with the state of Western Australia. But also we have the Roebuck Bay Marine Park. And in last year, we formally had our IPA dedicated over certain parts of Roebuck Plains. And this is an IPA that is obviously quite unique in its sense. So it's an IPA over a station that's viable economic station. So the station is still able to manage. But Yawuru are able to work on some key ecological assets. Obviously, there's a Ramsar listed wetland on that station as well, and that represents, I suppose, what was identified in the Yawuru Culture Management Plan about our vision to manage the country in a very holistic and interconnected manner. So when we talk about innovation and thinking outside of the box, I think that's a true representation of that. So I think, moving forward in regards to the Kimberley, how can we start to look at and reinvent, I suppose, processes that were, not outside of the norm, I suppose. So develop new ways of thinking in regards to how we can better work together in managing the cultural and ecological assets that exist within the landscape in the North Kimberley. And I'll hand it over to Albert.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Albert Wiggin. As I was announced, I am the cultural manager of Nyul Rangers under the KLC, but I also am the director of the Kimberley Land Council for the Nyul people. And I'm here just today to obviously support the team in regards to promoting why we believe the KISS project under the Kimberley Marine Research Project is vitally important and valuable towards research and science into the future. in the Kimberley area. I guess, first of all, I put this image of the raft because that was a very good snapshot of basically the relationship Indigenous people in the Kimberley still have. That photo was only taken at the start of this year or last year. It just really goes to show that Indigenous people up in saltwater country in the Kimberley still very much have this real strong, I guess, identification with their culture and the strong connection with their land. And they still practice that. And they still actually go out every day, and they still very much practice a lot of that traditional knowledge that they have inherited through countless generations. And then we progress to the next image, which obviously gives you an image of the young fellows that are inspired by that. This is basically a snapshot of our ranger group back in Nyul country. And you can see there's nothing but smiles and faces on there. And they're actually on their way to Lesbian Islands, on their way to do some turtle research. And basically, it just shows you the degree of enthusiasm and excitement that I guess research is now starting to introduce when it comes to the development of our Kimberley Ranger program. And I guess why we love the Kimberley so much, obviously it's who we are, and why we love the saltwater country so much is because we, like I mentioned, we still very much rely on, you know, its health and its stability to obviously survive and thrive as individual groups, language groups along the coastline. And so I guess I'm here to basically talk about why it's important to me, but I think it's really important to also recognize that there is also a degree of uncertainty and fear that is now starting to be developed in regards to a lot of remote communities because of a lot of big plans that are coming, you know, top-heavy sort of agendas. We are obviously looking at the prospect around northern development and the exploitation of a lot of our land and resources in regards to accommodate obviously bigger demands on a national scale. And as Indigenous people, we're sort of in a space now where a lot of the time we were unsure and uncertain about what were the implications and always, I guess, afraid of changes. But because of the development of the Kimberley Ranger Network and the capacity of Indigenous people actually managing their own country, and then taking that a step further and utilizing the support and I guess collaboration of research and science to develop the more technical skills to obviously, you know, develop more capacity around managing and owning, you know, more management, I guess, boundaries around their land. And, you know, I think whilst it's all exciting and it's really positive that we are stepping into this revolutionary sort of space, we are a part of this evolution, and we are all part of it. And knowledge is not biased. Knowledge speaks for itself. And, you know, I think we're in a really exciting time where we as Indigenous people are now starting to get the recognition that we felt is overdue for a very long time in regards to how our knowledge can complement science and research. And in the last 2 years during this journey with the KISS project, we've obviously been given an opportunity to really digest what does that mean and what are the benefits associated with integrating science and research with Indigenous knowledge. And what are some of the potential and possible sort of productive tools that can come out of having those sort of discussions. And we'll see a lot of those tools presented later on in today's discussion. But I think whilst everything is in a really positive space, I think it's really important to understand that the real reason why the Kimberley is being researched, the real reason why people are trying to understand the environmental value around the Kimberleys is ultimately because everybody knows it's going to be under a lot of pressure. And we always, as Indigenous people, we have this strong fear that if the wrong government gets into place, well then obviously the Kimberleys can potentially become the next mining sort of precinct like the Pilbara. And obviously the city is really wonderful and technology is great, but that all comes at the expense of our natural landscapes. And so it's imperative that we as Indigenous people who are still connected to that land, still having that healthy relationship with our land, develop the skills and capacity to work alongside science so that we best look after the environment, not only for our own community, but for everybody ultimately into the future.